The absolute wisdom cannot be expressed in words. Not because the enlightened ones want to hide it, but because language itself is simply not capable of containing it. Anything that is spoken aloud already becomes a distorted version of the truth. Words are just tools, but when used to describe something that lies beyond ordinary perception, they are like trying to scoop up the entire ocean with a small cup. Human thinking is confined by the very system of language it uses. Whenever we speak about something, we are actually relying on pre-existing concepts. Yet supreme wisdom is not a concept. It is a living reality that cannot be locked into any framework of thought. The very moment we give it a name, it has already turned into something else, something that can be defined, misunderstood, and interpreted in countless different ways. This is precisely why enlightened beings often avoid giving direct answers to metaphysical questions. Take the Buddha, for example. When asked about the universe, about what happens after death, or about the ultimate nature of reality, he chose silence. Not because he did not know, but because any answer would have created attachment to a wrong idea. If he had said that life continues after death, people would cling to it as an absolute truth, while reality is far beyond the notions of existence and non-existence. If he had said that nothing exists after death, people would fall into nihilism. But that too is not the truth. Language always traps us into duality, while absolute wisdom exists beyond all dualities. The enlightened understand that if they try to put truth into words, the listener will only interpret it according to their own filters, not according to the essence of reality itself. Everyone carries a personal archive of memories and experiences, and whenever they hear something, they automatically interpret it based on what they already know. But the ultimate truth cannot be approached in this way. If someone has not yet lived through the depth of experience, they will only grasp a fragment of the truth, or worse, they will completely misunderstand it. That is why great sages throughout history have preferred to teach indirectly. They do not hand out ready-made answers. Instead, they offer guidance, nudges, and situations that allow the student to discover the truth by themselves. Because once truth is realized directly, it is no longer a concept. It becomes a living reality, beyond all words. The human brain is not designed to perceive the ultimate reality directly. From the very moment we are born, we are programmed to think in patterns, to analyze life through logic, cause and effect, and linear reasoning. But supreme wisdom exists outside of all these frameworks. And this is why silence, presence, and direct experience have always been the deepest teachings of the awakened ones. But absolute wisdom does not operate in that way. It has no beginning, no end, and it is not bound by time or space. Meanwhile, our thinking is entirely based on division, on categories, and on definitions. The Dunning-Kruger effect is a clear demonstration of how humans misunderstand wisdom. Those who know little often think they know everything, while those who have truly reached a higher level of understanding become ever more aware of the limits of thought itself. This explains why true masters, the more enlightened they become, the less they speak, or even refuse to explain directly. They cannot transmit absolute wisdom through words, because the listener can only receive it to a certain extent, and in many cases, that extent is entirely distorted. The human brain operates in a linear way. It always looks for cause and effect, always tries to impose some kind of order on the world. But ultimate reality does not move in this linear fashion. A person may ask, where do we go after death? Yet the very form of that question already assumes there must be a place to go. In truth, the idea of going somewhere only makes sense within the three-dimensional space we currently inhabit. So when enlightened beings refuse to answer, it is not because they do not know. It is because any answer will inevitably be misunderstood through the limited framework of human thinking. It is like trying to explain color to someone who was born blind. You can say that red feels like heat, or that blue feels like coolness. But no matter how hard you try, that person will never truly understand what color is. They can only relate it to sensations they already know, hot and cold. The essence of color, however, remains beyond their reach. In the same way, when the enlightened attempt to speak of ultimate reality, the listener can only understand it through the lens of their prior experiences. And almost always, that understanding is distorted. This is also why many people, when they hear about concepts like no-self, timelessness, or non-duality, often find them confusing or even reject them outright. Clearly, the human brain is not programmed to naturally accept such ideas. By default, it seeks stability, clarity, and definition, while absolute wisdom is precisely the dissolution of all definitions. And so, if a person is not ready in terms of awareness, they simply cannot grasp what the enlightened are pointing to, even if it is explained in the clearest words possible. That is why enlightened beings choose silence, or choose to guide their students into a state where they can discover the truth by themselves, because only through direct experience can truth be truly understood. Take Bodhidharma, the great master who founded Zen Buddhism in China. When he first arrived, he did not teach with long discourses. He did not try to convince anyone of the truth. Instead, he simply sat in meditation, facing a wall, for 9 years without speaking a single word. People around him could not understand. They looked at him with suspicion. Some even thought he was mad. But those who were ready, those who had the eyes to see, realized that his teaching was not through words at all, it was through his absolute presence. 9 years of silent meditation was not meaningless silence. It was the most powerful message of all. Truth cannot be expressed in words. It cannot be confined within thoughts or concepts. It can only be seen directly in the deep stillness of consciousness. If you are still searching outside, still waiting for someone else to explain it to you, that means you are not yet ready. Because real wisdom does not come from books. It does not come from lectures. It can only be recognized in the absolute awakening within yourself. There is an old story about a student who came to a Zen master and asked about absolute truth, but instead of giving him an answer, the master simply smiled. The student kept asking, day after day, yet received nothing but a smile or silence. His patience began to wear thin. His mind grew restless with doubt. He wondered, perhaps the master doesn't know? Or maybe he is testing me? But then one day, when the student's mind completely let go of doubt, when he no longer expected an answer from the outside, suddenly, he awakened. In that very moment of no longer searching, he realized that the answer had never been in words. It had always been there, right within the silence of the master. In that stillness where no questions remained, no expectations lingered, he discovered the true essence of wisdom. And once it is seen, every question becomes meaningless. Krishnamurti, one of the great enlightened teachers of the 20th century, was once expected to become the spiritual leader of a vast organization. Thousands were ready to follow him as a kind of world teacher. Yet in 1929, he shocked the world by dissolving the organization, abandoning every title, every system of teaching. And he declared openly, "Truth is a pathless land. There is no road, no method, no fixed way to reach it." He rejected all traditional forms of teaching, not because he denied the existence of truth, but because he understood a vital reality. When people cling to a doctrine, they turn it into a belief system. Instead of directly experiencing reality, they merely follow a map, a set of dogmas. They stop truly seeking truth, and instead search for a ready-made path to hold on to. But truth cannot be trapped inside any system. It cannot be replicated. It cannot be reduced to a fixed route. If there is a path laid out in front of you, then following it is not awakening, it is only unconscious obedience. That is why Krishnamurti refused to have disciples, refused to let anyone follow him, refused to build a religion or allow his words to become a doctrine. He forced people to discover the way by themselves. Because if you truly want to see truth, you cannot walk in someone else's footsteps. You must take your own. And all of these stories, in the end, point back to the same realization. Truth is not something given, not something taught. It must be lived and discovered directly. Wisdom does not lie in words. It lives in the silent awareness itself. If someone continues to search for answers through thinking, they will only receive concepts, distorted fragments, shaped by dualistic thought. But when a person lets go of every question, when there is no longer a craving for an answer from the outside, when they dare to face themselves without demanding explanations, that is the moment truth reveals itself. Not as an idea, but as a living reality beyond expression. So then, how can a student awaken on their own? If absolute wisdom cannot be conveyed through words, if the masters refuse to provide final explanations, what can the student do to recognize truth for themselves? The very first step is this: stop searching for ready-made answers. If you approach an enlightened being, hoping to hear the ultimate truth, the absolute explanation, then in that very moment, you are already moving in the wrong direction. Because whatever can be expressed in words is not the real truth. Every answer, no matter how perfect it may seem, is still only a fragment. And if you cling to it, you imprison yourself in a framework of thought, a system of belief, never truly touching reality. That is why the great enlightened ones never built dogmas, never created rigid systems of belief for people to follow. They knew that anything expressed in words would only become an obstacle. Because once people cling to an idea, they stop there instead of seeking directly through their own experience. So if some piece of knowledge makes you feel confined, if some theory forces you only to believe but not to observe for yourself, then pause, step back, look deeply within. Do not rush to believe anything, even the words spoken by those you most respect, because truth is not in the words. It can only be recognized in your own awakened awareness. There is a common confusion that almost everyone falls into. They believe knowledge and wisdom are the same. They think that someone who reads many books, has vast understanding, and can debate philosophy or science must be a wise person. But this is not true. Knowledge can be learned. It can be copied from others. It can be memorized and used as a tool. But wisdom is entirely different. It cannot be taught. It cannot be copied. It cannot be reached by simply reading or listening. Wisdom is not something you accumulate. It is a state of awareness. A person may read hundreds of books about meditation, learn every theory about enlightenment, and explain clearly the ideas of no self, emptiness, or ultimate truth. Yet when faced with loss, with grief, with suffering, they still react like anyone else, afraid, clinging, angry. Their knowledge cannot free them. Because what they hold is borrowed from the outside. They know about enlightenment, but they do not live in enlightenment. This is the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is information. Wisdom is deep inner realization. A person may learn that everything in life is impermanent, but only when they truly witness impermanence, when a loved one passes away, when status fades, when everything they once trusted collapses, only then does the understanding become real. At that moment, impermanence is no longer a concept, but a living truth, undeniable and direct, and that is wisdom. The same with love. A person may read about love, recite poetry about it, describe it in the most beautiful words, but if they have never loved, what they know is still only theory. They can decorate their speech with metaphors, but they do not truly understand love. In the same way, a person may speak eloquently about enlightenment, but if they have never experienced even a single moment of true awakening, then it is only theory, not wisdom. If all someone can do is repeat the words of others, then what they speak is not wisdom. So how does one develop wisdom instead of merely accumulating knowledge? The answer is simple: experience. Instead of only reading, observe. Instead of only analyzing, live with reality itself, without trying to define it. If you want to understand the silence of the enlightened, don't just read about it. Practice silence yourself. If you want to understand meditation, don't just study it. Sit down and feel the present moment. If you want to truly grasp impermanence, don't just listen to others speak of it. Look directly at the changes unfolding in your own life. Knowledge can be forgotten, but wisdom cannot. When someone truly understands something with their whole being, that understanding becomes part of them. It cannot be separated. That is why the masters do not teach like professors. They guide their students toward their own experiences. Because only when you see for yourself, only when you understand directly, does wisdom appear. Not all enlightened ones chose silence or taught only a few close disciples. There were masters who tried to spread truth widely. But what was the result? Whenever truth is taught too broadly, it begins to lose its purity. What was once original, pure, and liberating eventually becomes distorted, simplified, and even exploited for purposes it was never meant to serve. In its earliest form, Buddhism was not a religion. It had no complex temples, no rigid rituals, no institutional hierarchy. The Buddha simply pointed out a path for people to free themselves from suffering. But as his teachings spread, it lost its original simplicity. It turned into an organization, a system, something that could be memorized and taught, but no longer a personal journey of discovery. People began to argue over which teaching was right, which was wrong, who had the authority to teach, and who did not. What began as a path of liberation became a network of rules, beliefs, and ranks. And countless followers entered the faith, without ever touching its true spirit. The same pattern unfolded in Taoism. Laozi never intended to establish a religion. He simply left behind the Tao Te Ching, a work filled with profound insights about the way the universe flows and how humans can live in harmony with the Tao. But as the philosophy spread, it was broken into schools, layered with rituals, blended with magical practices, and even used for profit. Truth, instead of being something to be experienced directly, was turned into a system of belief. And once something becomes belief, it is no longer a living truth. Even Western philosophy has not escaped this fate. Socrates once emphasized, "I know that I know nothing." because he understood that true wisdom does not lie in ready-made answers, but in endless self-inquiry. Yet later, philosophy itself was turned into theoretical systems, where people argued endlessly about who was right and who was wrong, instead of using philosophy as a mirror to awaken themselves. When a truth becomes a system, it stops being a tool for liberation. But what happens when truth is turned into a framework where people become trapped? Why does this keep happening? The reason is simple. Human beings have a tendency to systematize everything. We want to control, we dislike ambiguity, and we fear what cannot be grasped. So when we encounter a truth that is too vast, too free, we try to lock it inside words, rules, and doctrines. Yet the very moment truth is boxed in, it ceases to be truth. It becomes only a distorted version, a shadow of the original. If you look back through history, you'll see that the greatest truths were rarely written down in books or broadcast widely. Instead, they were passed directly from master to disciple, only to those truly ready to receive. Because the masters understood, to spread a truth too broadly is to risk destroying it. Once repeated too often, it no longer invites experience. It becomes dogma. And when people only believe without experiencing, they no longer touch reality itself. That's why true seekers of wisdom should never cling blindly to systems. They should not believe teachings just because they're told to. Instead, they should ask their own questions, live their own experiences, and discover directly for themselves. For wisdom does not lie in words repeated 1,000 times. It lies in the raw, direct awareness of each individual. That is why the great masters never rushed to teach everyone. They knew that only those who were truly ready could keep truth alive, rather than turn it into a lifeless corpse of ancient words. The greatest masters did not teach with words. They taught with methods that went beyond language, most importantly, by forcing their students to experience truth for themselves. Their ways were never about theory, but about practice where truth could be recognized directly, without being filtered through concepts. One of the most powerful methods was meditation, whether in Zen, Vipassana, or Chan traditions. When a master guided a disciple, they didn't deliver long lectures or explain step by step like a classroom lesson. They simply told the student, sit down and observe. No lengthy discourse, no complicated philosophy, only one simple act. Watch your own mind. Yet in that simplicity lies the power. Because when there are no words to cling to, no instructions to depend on, the student is forced to face themselves. And in that silence, truth begins to reveal itself. Another paradoxical but deeply effective method was the Zen koan. Koans are questions or statements that defy logic, sometimes even appearing absurd. For example, if a disciple asks, "What is enlightenment?" the master might reply, "What is the sound of one hand clapping?" A question that reason cannot answer. This shatters the mind's dependence on logic. The student cannot figure it out by thinking, and the harder they try, the further they drift from truth. Only when they completely let go of dualistic thought, only when they experience the moment directly without analysis, do they realize the answer is not in words, it is in pure awareness itself. There is also another way the enlightened transmit wisdom through presence itself. In traditions like Shaktipat in Hinduism, or certain schools of Taoism and Tibetan practice, it is believed that a true master does not need to speak at all. Their very presence, their energy, naturally influences those who are ready. This is not magic or superstition, it is simply the resonance of a consciousness that has reached a higher frequency, impacting those sensitive enough to receive it. But of course, not everyone has the chance to meet such a master. Those who have reached the highest state of wisdom are as rare as a single drop of water in the vast ocean. That is why, instead of searching outward for an enlightened companion, the real path is to turn inward. Observe your own mind, train in silence, refine your awareness. Connect with that higher state of wisdom within yourself, without waiting for anyone else to guide you. All of these methods share one essential point. They do not give you anything new. But here's the paradox. If truth cannot be transmitted through words, if enlightenment cannot be captured by language, then why do I make so many videos talking about these things? If truth is not in knowledge but can only be realized through your own direct experience, then why does this channel even exist, with entire playlists filled with talks, analyses, and explanations about consciousness, the mind, and philosophy? The answer is this. I don't share these teachings to help you accumulate more knowledge. I share them to help you remove the layers of thought that have been clouding the wisdom already within you. If you've ever watched the playlist called The Gateway to the Mind, you'll notice I don't try to give you a rigid belief system or claim to deliver the ultimate truth. Instead, I raise questions. I challenge old assumptions. I offer new perspectives. Each video is not an answer, but a doorway for you to look more deeply into your own mind. But knowledge without practice remains only knowledge. And that is why I created another playlist, Mindfulness in Practice. In that space, you're not just listening, not just understanding, you're directly experiencing. Through exercises of observing the mind, through guided practices of awareness, through methods to see reality without distortion, and through tools to harness your own energy. None of these are meant to be memorized. They are meant to be practiced, experienced, and realized by you. Because every person is at a different stage of awareness. Every person has their own unique journey, and no one can walk it on your behalf. That's why I don't focus on just one angle. I weave through many lenses, from cognitive science to Buddhism, from Eastern philosophy to modern psychology, from the mechanics of the mind to the traps of thought. I make many different kinds of videos, not to create a rigid theory, but to offer you multiple pathways, so that you can find the one that resonates with you. Some people arrive here through philosophy, others through Buddhism, some through science. But no matter the doorway, they all lead to one essential point: your awakening. Yes, I could choose to make videos that are simpler, more trendy, more marketable. I could replicate content just to gain more views, but I don't choose that path. I choose this path because I know somewhere out there are people truly searching, and for them, this content matters. This channel is not a place that gives you truth. It is a place that helps you see the truth that has always been there. Of course, there are now many channels that copy this one, sometimes without clear purpose, sometimes even deliberately choosing names that sound like ours, hoping to confuse viewers. This doesn't just dilute the originality of what we share, it can even distort the deeper meaning, because when content is cut, reshaped, or placed in a different context, its spirit is lost. Its essence fades, and sometimes it even misleads. When a message is interpreted from too many directions, the original intention can vanish. What was once authentic becomes fragmented. That is why I always remind you, I am not a guru, I am not a master. I do not see myself as a teacher. I am simply sharing what I find valuable. And so, with every video on this channel, I don't ask you to believe. I don't even ask you to reject. All I ask is that you observe for yourself. Try it, experience it, and you will discover your own answers. Thank you for walking this journey with us. I wish you and your loved ones health, peace, and wisdom.